Hey everyone, my name is Azriel,
And I am Anthony.
and today Anthony and I are going to give our first impressions and honestly really just have a conversation about the first I don't know, I would say about like 12 to 15 hours ish. What do you think?
Yeah, about to the main first story or the main second story point.
Yeah, so about the first 12 to 15 hours of Dragon Age The Veilguard. Now, to kind of keep the conversation just moving along, we are going to split this up into 5 different categories. We are going to give a review score to each category and then sort of round things off with our final thoughts. And then whether or not you should really even get the game.
Yeah, and you might be asking yourself why us, why this video? Because we're nerds. We love Dragon Age. We love video games. I think between the two of us, we have about 50 years of gaming experience. Like we are that obsessed. Um, Growing up, reading video game magazines, listening to video game podcasts and reviews and all that. Like we're pretty obsessed. We're pretty nerdy, and we do love the old Dragon Age games. So while they may not be end-all be-all opinions, I do think they are valuable specifically in the greater scope of looking at Dragon Age The Veilguard.
Yeah, absolutely. Saying we're like kind of nerds is putting it lightly. But without further ado, here is our first impressions of Dragon Age The Veilguard.
So first we're going to start out with story and the overall setup of said story. Because to me, that's always been the most important part of Dragon Age games. Origins was very focused on obviously your origin and your background story and being a character in a living, breathing world. And I think this game, it sits in the middle of what I think is a good story.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I don't think yeah, I mean, I guess looking back at the prior Dragon Age games is the sort of the best way to put this. In Origins, like you said, you have your background, right? You have the race that you are, you have like sort of the social status that you have, and then each one of those has its own little path. And I don't necessarily think that has to be the baseline for a Dragon Age game to be good, but to kind of have that be your background and then to be where you are with this game, I think it's just like a little rough. It's just you're not really starting off very strong, in my opinion. I mean, the game does give you this initial like meaningful decision to make, in sort of the character that you take with you through sort of that initial fight with Solus. But I mean, beyond that, I feel like there hasn't been much distinguishing me. It's like I picked that I'm a Grey Warden, and they'll say that, but like saying it doesn't really mean much. Like I want to see like something substantial happen in the game. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's no meaningful no meaningful reaction to your background in the game. None of the characters really care what your background is outside of a few throwaway lines. Like I know if you're a dwarf, you could have a conversation with Harding about like dwarves and magic and how like the stone stuff is very strange. But to me, it kind of felt like, yeah, I'm playing a point A to point B game, and I'm just trying to get to the next dialogue box.
Yeah, it's exactly what it feels like. And then, when it comes to getting from point A to B, I think what's important, especially in a game like this, where like the stakes are very high, right? Like you just had Solus get kind of locked away, and he is what you would come to understand to be like the natural sort of, I guess, like for lack of a better way of putting it, like cure to the problem that they're having now, which is those two elven gods having come out of the Fade. Or being locked up wherever they were, and then along with that, bringing sort of this unique blight with them. And you would think with that happening that there would be, like some kind of urgency behind it. But I feel like in a lot of the dialogue that I was fed from the characters throughout the opening sequence, it didn't, or not even just opening sequence, opening like 12 to 15-ish hours, right? It didn't feel like I was in a rush. It didn't feel like I needed to do anything. Like I'm totally cool with just taking my time and like lazily walking around like where all the Alluvians are, going back and like checking out the forests and things like that. It didn't seem like anybody cared that I was, just doing whatever. And it's weird, especially coming from, like a developer who made Mass Effect 3, and in that game, there's like this, like everybody's talking about this.
The looming threat. Yeah.
Like it's all up in your face. And I understand in this game, it just happened. It's super recent. But I don't think that's necessarily an excuse to me. Maybe they could have done like a week time jump. Maybe they could have had like this immediate like a spread of influence over the world.
So did you get the same? Did you get the same read on the game that I did timeline wise, where it was like everything that we did in the first 12 to 15 hours of the game was within 2 days after the initial thing with Solus?
Yeah, it felt like it happened pretty soon, and maybe that's just a consequence of how much of the game that we've played. Maybe like 20 hours in, they do a time jump, or 30 hours in, or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels very much like. It doesn't, the setting that they immediately put you in doesn't necessarily lend itself to sort of like an interesting and like meaningful sort of story, something that moves you along.
Well, I think
that makes
you
want to
nailed
continue
it.
playing.
I think you nailed it when you said there's a lack of urgency. There's no like driving force behind like I have to go do this right now for the main quest. Like it's like, yeah, I got to go save Lucanus, but I'm going to go walk around the forest and get some materials and upgrade my weapons and see what's behind this puzzle over here, which is all well and good, and it's fun to interact in the world that way. But, do you want something that you want to feel invested in? It's not this.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what kind of kills me about it, is that, having that ability to explore and do what you want, I think is fine. But then creating sort of a wider I guess like picture of like, hey, like you kind of got to move along. Like we got to do this sooner rather than later. There's just none of that. And I don't know. I think I feel like for me, that feels almost like the bare minimum of like a story where there's like this huge impending like evil and it's going to take over the world and do blah, blah, blah. Like I expect at the very least that like my character, the companions surrounding me, the world itself sort of necessitates us speeding that along. And to its benefit, it does give you that, right? It has one town that is taken over by the Blight, and you're like,
it shows you like, yeah, this is what could happen to the rest of the world if you don't do something.
But that's it. And then nothing. And then the next couple towns you go in, everybody's like hunky dory, like everybody's cool, and it's like, okay, like, I mean, I guess, but
the markets are still full. Nobody's panicking about anything.
Yeah, like I thought it set the tone well with that initial town, and I was like, that's cool. And then like that was it. And sure, they're collaborating with some of the gangsters in the city, right? The Venatori and things like that.
But that's the thing, is those Venatori have nothing to do with like the overarching story and like the evil villains of this story. That's just like something that's always been bad and always been there, and you're interacting with them and trying to like defeat them. But like in Docktown, where you're like, fighting the cult, and there's the church that was massacred and stuff, but then that has nothing to do with the main story.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like it mattered. Like that whole town was kind of like, or not the whole town, but that whole church was like kind of killed, and nobody seemed to care. And it was just odd, like I don't expect the whole city to go on lockdown, but I expect like somebody being like, hey, like, what the fuck was that? Like, what's going on over there?
Hey, 70 people are missing. Yeah. This is weird.
Yeah. Nobody's like, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was weird. It kind of bothered me. I feel like in situations like that, you can kind of get away with the world kind of not necessarily realizing itself. But I feel like at least then for me, I would lean on the companions to kind of help move things along, right? Like they're kind of like that invisible hand. They're kind of like the developer in the background, sort of like helping you inch you forward.
Dragon Age has always been about the companions.
Yeah.
So I mean, companions is our next big point. So what's your overall for the story? Like, what would you rate the story out of 10?
Yeah, I think I don't feel great about it, but like I said, the bare minimum for me is like, give me a sense of urgency, and it's faintly there. It's like a whisper in the wind. And because you're not giving me the bare minimum, it's hard for me to give you anything above that average. So I'd give it like a 4. Pretty confident 4. At least thus far, the story thus far, a 4.
Yeah, I think I'm close. I was going to give it a 5 out of 10. But to me, a 5 out of 10 is average. A lot of people think 5 out of 10 is like, oh, it's a 50%. It's still an F. Like, no, it's 10 is perfect. 10 is you can't do any better than that. A 5 it's average. It kept me interested for 12, 15 hours, but it didn't really make me want to like.
It gets the job done,
Yes. So with that, we should move on to companions, because that's kind of story as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you said, it's a really important aspect of it. So the way we're going to kind of like approach this is that we're going to break down the companions that we've come across thus far. And again, very light spoilers, nothing super deep, but just to kind of give you an idea of who we will be speaking on, it's going to be Harding, Lucanus, Bellara, and then Neve. But to get into Harding, I think both of us could probably agree that out of the four, she's definitely the most interesting.
She's the most interesting. Yeah, she's the one that I want to spend the most time with, the one that I want to learn more about, and that's because of a very specific thing that happens in the story, pretty early on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I don't know. It's hard to kind of explain exactly what makes you want to play this or play with this character, but to not get too spoilery, the thing happens. When it happens, it sort of sets them up to be just a little bit more than what they
bigger.
were.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
like that's cool, and like it's almost like lore. You know what I mean? And I love lore, especially in a game like this. So, again, to like kind of avoid those spoilers, it definitely is an interesting twist. And then the dialogue and the tone from Harding, I think, is really solid. I feel like, honestly, who's ever voicing Harding, I think, is doing a pretty damn good job. You could definitely feel, you can feel pain in her voice. You can feel like that joy. You can feel the anger. It's like there's range, and
100%. I think, and it also, it's not a companion spoiler, but I do also, just because you were talking about voice acting, I want to give credit to Varric's voice actor for narrating. I think he did a wonderful job as a narrator.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure. I'm assuming he's a companion later. I don't know, as a matter of fact, just yet. I'm gonna assume so, but yeah, it's definitely. He's exceptional.
He's there. He's just he's down for the count right now, but he's still around.
Yeah, he's hanging out. But the next would be Lucanus. Honestly, I think we're kind of going through this in the order of people that we like most to least. But the next would be Lucanus. Not to say I necessarily dislike him more than Harding or anything like that, but I just like Harding a lot. But he's super interesting. I mean, he's literally taken over by a demon, and it's something that you see a sort of struggle with.
He's this game's Gollum.
Throughout the game. Yeah, exactly.
He's this game's Gollum. He's got the voice in his head of another like evil thing trying to take over and motivate him in ways to get what his possessor wants done. And it shows you that. It lets you see him having those conversations like Gollum with Smeagol in the mirror or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's cool. It's definitely it's like a nice that contrast is always it's nice to have that contrast. And when it's done well, you can definitely tell. And I would say it's done well here. At least so far, what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
I do like, and I love his fucking intro, dude. When he fucking, it's like a WWE match, bro. When he comes in and beats the shit out of the
he literally clotheslines two cultists with like demon wings. Like he sprouts his demon wings and runs between them and just smacks them in the face.
No, he's such a baller, dude. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's pretty cool. The next, and then these two kind of just go right downhill. I got to be honest. Bellara, I'm just really not a big fan. I do like the idea of the character being somebody who does have a lot of knowledge of like old elven tech and things like that. I think that's super interesting. I think she looks cool too, just like visually. I think it's a like really interesting looking character. But you know, it's
her writing. It's her writing.
It's not just that, but you described this to me before, well, where you're talking about like how she's waiting to look at the camera and like laugh track type shit, you know?
Yeah. She's the Marvel character of this game. And that was what I was worried about going into this game most, was because like the preview that I had saw, that a lot of people saw, it felt very like, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This is a joke, point. Like, you know, well, that just happened. Like, she is that character.
Yeah.
It's 100%. And it's not because I agree with you 100%. I think her place in the story and the role that her character fulfills is very interesting, but I just don't like her like as a character.
Yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, she's I mean, but at least she has a personality, unlike our last one.
Yeah, that's true. I'll end with the fact that I do think that it's redeemable, potentially.
Yeah,
but
it could get a lot better.
But as you said, the last one, man, Neve is just boring. I'm just bored. Like, it's like talking to like a cardboard. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
very one-dimensional. It's not really interesting.
100%.
I will admit,
milquetoast.
She does have good facial animations. They do, like when her like fucking
She's the best. She's the best. Like she's the most emotive one.
Yeah, like her fucking cheek, like her lips go like and make like a half smile on her face, you know? Like I'll give her that. Like she has that going for her.
She's got a cheeky smirk.
But like her tone is just like, I don't know, dude. I feel like I'm like, just let me skip through dialogue. I don't, but like I want to fucking skip right through it all because it's just kind of boring. I'm just not a big fan. There's not much to say about it. I don't think there's too much going on.
Yeah, as of the first 12, 15 hours, she doesn't have a lot to her besides she's the mage.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much all the dialogue is too, is I am the mage. But yeah, I mean, I would say, Harding Lucan is solid. I think Balara could be redeemable. Same thing with Neve. I mean, like Neve's boring right now, but like who's to say that in the future she doesn't get a hell of a lot more interesting. But yeah, I would say so far, if I'm gonna rate both of these, or rate all four of these rather, like kind of as a whole, I'd give them like a 7 out of 10. I think would be pretty solid. And that's kind of being very liberal with like the redeemability of them. Because again, we are still kind of early in the game. You never know, but I think a 7 out of 10 is pretty solid for that.
Yeah, this is a preview, or first impressions, not a review.
Yeah,
I don't feel comfortable giving like a overall total final score on it. But so far, companions are 7 out of 10 for me as well.
yeah, exactly.
I think they're good. There's a lot of interesting stuff there, a lot of interesting aspects, and it's one of the things that made me want to keep playing the game.
For sure, I would agree with that. But yeah,
but that also brings us into the next point. Like, how do those companions interact with the world that they are building? Because that's always been, like I said earlier, the most interesting aspect of Dragon Age is your place in this living, breathing world that has gone on for years before you've been there and will continue going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think, so far every character does have sort of a kind of a unique interaction with the world. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's really cool. I'm a big fan of that. But just to kind of like preface, like, working our way into like the world building category, which would be the third one that we're talking about.
Yeah, they do a thing where like on the like the skill wheel, when you like press right bumper or whatever, it like lets you select your companion to interact with a very specific thing in the environment that they are specialists in.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I think to me the world's been gorgeous. I really enjoy the map layouts and how everything looks, and maneuvering and working through these levels, doing the little puzzles and stuff. It looks great too.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And one thing, so I'll hit on two different things, right? The way the world looks and sort of the maneuvering through it, right? The way the world looks, like you said, I think is gorgeous. I think it's a beautiful game. They do a great job of really setting up a lot of cool vistas, and like allowing you to do like slow pans of your camera to really kind of eat it all in and stuff like that.
It's cinematic. There's a photo mode that you could take advantage of if you're into that. I've never been a photo mode guy, but I know a lot of people really care about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's nice. I played around with it. I got some cool photos. It's not for me. It's not, my main selling point in the game, but it's nice to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they kill it with that. All the set pieces, the buildings, the lighting, the locations that the game takes place in. The trees are very nice. It's all really beautiful. But the second thing I wanted to hit on was the maneuvering. Now, I know for some people it's a little contentious whether or not the game or the world feels very gamey, right? There's like a lot of like interactions that you do to get from A to B. The average person in this world isn't going to partake in, right? They're not going to do this companion's ability to like create this or move that or whatever,
People aren't going to be climbing over market stalls to get to a ledge that they could jump to a different ledge from.
Yeah. And like I said, I think it's very much like up to your taste, whether you like that or not. I don't necessarily mind it. I don't think you mind it either, Anthony, like just doing the world being gamey. I think that's fine. There is a lot of it. But it's cool. I think it's fine. Nothing crazy. But again, it's a matter of taste.
I do got to give them props. They added like the mantling animation. So like if you get up to a ledge and you don't quite get it, your character will still like lock onto the ledge and pull themselves up.
Yeah.
I think the game feels good. It feels good to move around the world.
Yeah, for sure.
But it does feel like a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Which again, matter of taste, whether you like that or not. I think the last thing I would hit on in terms of like the world would be the NPCs, and by an extension, your companions, yourself. And that's that. I think the art style is great. I just don't necessarily think the character models really fit. It feels kind of a little out of place. I'm just not a big fan of the way the characters look. I think if they had less of a big-headed, cartoony look and went more, Inquisition style. I mean, honestly, even Dragon Age 2 style, where it's a little. I think Dragon Age 2 leans just a tiny bit into like a little less realistic. Even if they went something like that, I think it would have been great. I feel like, I mean, it's like you said earlier, it's like Marvel, right? Like I feel like I'm playing, the next. I don't know. It's just a little rough at times.
Well, we'll get to it in our next section, combat. But like, it goes here too. It's like Spider-Man's Activision or Activision Spider-Man.
Yeah,
like it's very like cartoony for the character models, but it doesn't quite fit the world that they've built because the art styles don't quite match.
Yeah,
the art style in the world is more like realistic. There's some dark stuff, like especially when you get to the blighted areas, like those look sick as fuck. And then the characters all look like they're coming out of a Pixar movie.
Yeah, true. And the same thing for
they made it look like Fortnite for the character models, but the actual world itself is like darker than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that the same would extend over to like the bad guys too that you're fighting. Pretty much all the bad guys. I mean, you're fighting humans, they're gonna look like you in different ways. The actual Darkspawn, obviously new look. There's some spoilers with that, so I don't want to really get into it. Again, matter of taste. I don't really like it, but maybe some people do. They just can be a little goofy at times. Some of the bigger Darkspawn, they look like little toys. So I don't know.
There's and we'll probably show it in the video here. We haven't edited the video yet, but like the difference between like what a Pride Demon looks like in this and what a Pride Demon looked like in Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
It's a lot less gritty, a lot smoother, if that makes sense. It's not bad. It's just not my personal taste.
That's the thing, is that like it looks good. It just doesn't look like what I want. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
World building overall, the art style, how you interact with it, all that. I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. Yeah. I think it's good. It's good enough. It's if it wasn't for some of the facial animations on characters, they have kind of that stiffness to them sometimes in the cheeks. Kind of similar to how Starfield does, where it just doesn't. They're emotive, like their eyebrows are raising, their eyes are doing different stuff, their mouths are moving, but like you could tell the emotion and expression they're trying to convey, but it doesn't exactly like I could make out what they're trying to tell me. Like, oh, this character is upset or this character is scared, but it doesn't look realistic.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like something's missing. Maybe it gets fixed with the patch, maybe that's intentional, I'm not too sure, but yeah, it just feels like something's missing. With your 7, I'm a big fan of the world. I really like it a lot. I would basically say pretty much everything that you're saying, except I think I give like just a lot of weight to just the way the world looks. And so I'd bump it up just a point to 8. Big fan of it.
Super fair.
Yeah, just, kind of the NPCs and the enemies a little odd, but the rest of it I think is super cool. Combat. Man, combat is, it's just kind of rough, man. The first like 30 minutes of fighting, I feel like a beast. You kind of get a couple abilities. You're really feeling yourself. You're telling your companions to do this, to do that, blah, blah, blah. But after 30 minutes, you might as well just stop fighting. I've heard a lot of people talk about lowering enemy health. Definitely necessary. They become sponges very quickly, even on normal difficulty. So I think lowering it 1 is good. Raising up their damage, I think is fine. Their aggression, I think is fine, just to kind of make it a little bit more engaging. But the actual like combat like cycle, hitting, dodging, parrying, if you really feel like wasting your time with that, and then casting spells, it's a big departure.
Now something we should mention is I did play a mage and you played a warrior, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
So we did get different experiences on the combat in that aspect of it. But to me, as a mage, I don't know if this was your experience as well, but it did feel like those mid-level or like mid-range MMO levels where you're like level 40, not quite level 60, you have your rotation down, you're waiting on cooldowns. Like it's just every fight is just, I know my rotation. It's, this spell, wait for the cooldowns, do some attacks and dodging in the meantime. This spell, wait for the cooldowns, and repeat until the enemy's dead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the issue with kind of giving yourself two spells, and then putting them on like sort of, uh, I don't like the idea of your resource bar being the opposite of how it normally is, right? Where you have like mana and you can sort of drain the mana pool and then it replenishes itself, right? Whereas on this, you kind of have to build up to the point where you get to use the ability and then you use one and it drops down again. You got to work your way back up. I think
I feel they did that for Mage too, where it's like I think they do call it Rage with Warriors or something like your mana
like
pool.
Yeah.
But like as a Mage, I should have mana before I go into a battle.
Yeah, I think
in
it's
my
ridiculous. Opinion. Yeah, I think it's ridiculous to go the other way around. It's just like such a limiting factor. I mean, I guess it does go both ways in terms of being limiting, but having to delay the fun part of combat in favor of the more like kind of I don't know, dull part of it. I don't know. It just doesn't necessarily work for me. I mean, they give you two abilities. They give you three abilities rather, and I guess kind of like a fourth in your what's that called?
The ultimate.
Not just the ultimate, but where you get to like now I do ice damage for like 5 seconds or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fourth, and then they do give you an ultimate as well, which to me the ultimate is like a remnant of when they were doing live service that they just didn't take out when they switched back to single player. I don't really like that in the game. It's really flashy and it looks like something that has like a little cinematic with it. To me, it just looks very.
It's Valorant.
It just looks out of place, dude. It doesn't look like this belongs in a Dragon Age. It's like when I do it, I'm like fucking elbow on the ground, or I'm punching the ground and then I drop the people's elbow on the whatever. Like it looks like, dude, what the hell am I doing? Like, is this Dragon Age or like, are we playing WWE? Like, with Lucanus kind of jumping in and clotheslining somebody and then I'm dropping the elbow. It's just, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just out of place, man.
You're 100% right. The Mage's ultimate is very how can I put it's the same as your long range spell. It's just like a beam that comes out of your staff. I will say I don't want to shit on it too much because I do think it looks good. The combat looks cinematic. We've probably been showing some clips of combat and how different things look. I didn't love doing the mage like staff combat, the long range, 1, 2, 3, and then the big attack on the fourth attack combo where you're just smashing X, 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 X over and over. But then there is a like secondary weapon for mages. And I know you didn't have this experience with warriors where it didn't change too much when you went from like sword and shield to two-handed.
Yeah, no, it was just like the sword and shield was a little bit quicker. The two-handed was like a little bit slower. That's
so for mage staff, it's long range, medium range, and then they have something called orb and dagger, which I actually really enjoyed. I thought the combat for that was like a lot more engaging and fun. The mage dodge is kind of like a blink spell, so you like disappear for a second and appear 6 feet away. It looks beautiful. It's pretty it's pretty interesting to do for the first 2-3 hours of the game. But then I literally just went down and changed the difficulty because I disliked the repetitive nature of the combat so much that I just wanted to get to the parts of the game that I did like. That was the companion stories and seeing more of the world and seeing more of the story. So I just like completely nuked combat difficulty and I ended up enjoying the game more. So I'm going to have to...
It's a sad reality, man.
Yeah, I'm going to have to give combat a 2 because when I took the combat aspect out of it, I started liking the game so much more. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. And I know that sounds super harsh, but it's just, I didn't like, if I remove an aspect of the game and the game gets better, that's a bad aspect of the game.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would say the only difference between the 2 and a 1 is the fact that the combat is functional. Like you can do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if it was completely dysfunctional, I would say a 1 is warranted. But yeah, I think a 2 is damn near close to that. And honestly, it probably deserves it because it's really just kind of rough. And maybe it's like, again, a matter of opinion. Maybe you enjoy it a lot. Not to say there's anything wrong with enjoying it. It's just not Dragon Age is kind of the problem. And that's sort of what you expect out of a Dragon Age game is that it's Dragon Age. But
I mean, for Christ's sake, in Origins, you would have to pause in between turns and think about what you're going to do next.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like it was like very strategical. And I think moving to the cooldown system instead of like an action point type system, where you're limited per turn and like your enemies are going to return some fire and stuff. This, I'm just like spamming dodge. I'm, avoiding all combat and just like keeping away in the back and just like coming in, tagging, backing out. It feels like I said earlier, Activision Spider-Man. Not that that doesn't look good, not that it isn't cool, but it's just not my type of game.
Yeah, for sure. It's just not it. I don't know. I'd give it a 3. Not much else to say. Just been shitting on it this whole time, but it kind of deserves it, to be honest. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, so, why do we do combat? We do combat because it's fun. We do combat because it's a nice way of interacting with the world, with the enemies, so on and so forth. But we also do it to get experience. We do it to progress, which kind of leads us into our last sort of little category.
RPGs, baby.
Yeah, which is the important aspect of, an RPG, which is progressing, is leveling up. And a lot of the time you level up so that way you can combat better. You can interact with the world in maybe more unique ways. Maybe your speech is better. Maybe your lying's better. Whatever it is. Maybe you can, move this thing because your strength is higher or whatever, like what have you. Right. But in this game specifically, your progression is pretty much there just for your combat. And it's hard to kind of like really be stoked about progressing when you're progressing through a combat that isn't even fun to partake in. You know what I mean?
I'm leveling up to get better at this combat that I don't give a fuck about.
Yeah, it's just kind of rough. So I don't know. It's hard to say. They did kind of a unique way with sort of the leveling tree and stuff like that. All the different options that you have. Some of them are just like incremental bonuses. Some of them are actually kind of a little bit more meaningful. I don't necessarily mind it, if I'm being honest. I don't mind the system. It's just hard to like be stoked about the system when it's, specifically set up to, do like a singular thing, which is combat. And again, not liking that.
There are no skills or levels that you gain that make you better at like dialogue or other things. Like in, it's one of my favorite games of all time, like Fallout New Vegas. You have to level up and then you could put points in speech or repair or, other skills that you can use to interact with the world in ways other than shooting things. And there's none of that in this. It's only to do more damage, take less damage. And if I don't care about the combat, I don't care about the progression.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like the issue is that it's hard to like, yeah, I don't know. It's they work in tandem. Now there are other sort of progression systems in the game, right? You have upgrading your companions, you have upgrading your shops, upgrading your workshops. There's just a couple different things sort of there. I think upgrading your companions, I think almost treats you like you're an idiot. They give you very little choice and they give you, a quote unquote, like you got to make a decision because you're picking either side of, whatever companion tree you're sort of moving your way into.
You'll lock out the other branch of whatever the skill was if you select one of them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just
there's no depth.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just like, dude, like, what am I? Like, you really think I'm this stupid? Like, I can't make like a meaningful decision. Like, at the very least, like, you could have just given me the same thing that you gave to the
main character.
Yeah. Now, I do have my opinion of why. We'll get into that here in just a moment with sort of our final thoughts on it. But they just treat you like you're an idiot all throughout that. They kind of give you a bit of respect with your own tree, but they kind of take that respect away with the companion tree. It's just a little unfortunate. I think upgrading your workshop, upgrading your shops is for sure something that's a remnant of the of when it was a live service game. It feels like it's something you see ever present in those games. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I don't know. I just don't really care for it. It doesn't. I don't know. Like, I have no like urge to want to do that, I guess. I don't know.
We don't need 7 different resources to upgrade a shop in the world.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird to me.
It should be like influence and gold, not like, oh, I need to go back and find more heartwood and I need to find more like fabric. Like that to me, like you said, live service was like, hey, you could spend $10.99 USD and we'll give you 500 Dragon Age bucks that you could then use to buy these other resources so you don't have to grind for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I don't know. It's unfortunate. It's a remnant of something old that was there before. And it's still kind of like rearing its ugly head even now, which is unfortunate. So I would say the progression system for me, I find it to be in this case specifically the characters, your companion or yourself, and then the companions. directly intertwined. The workshop, the shops, I don't really care about that stuff. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's bad or it's good. It's just kind of present. It's something you'll do as you play, but to kind of give the progression system a rating, again, I think it's a complete extension of your combat. I just give it a 3. The same thing I gave combat.
That's the thing, because it's an extension of your combat. If there was more depth to progression or more depth to combat, I think I would like this a lot more. But there were times where I was playing the game and I would have 3 or 4 levels that I hadn't assigned the skill points from, but I just didn't care because I just wanted to get through the combat anyway. And I lowered the difficulty. I don't give a fuck. Like it wasn't challenging on normal or hard. So just let me get through the bullshit to get to the story. If I don't care about the combat, I don't care about the progression system. So I'm going to give it a 2 as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just rough. It's unfortunate to see. But I think with that, having spoke about the story, the companions, the worlds, the combat, and the progression system, those are sort of the 5 big categories that we wanted to hit. I'm sure there's different things that we probably could have had sort of focused on instead for this or for that or blah, blah, blah. But again, after only going through the first 12 to 15-ish hours of the game, this seemed like it made sense. Specifically for this game. Probably in future games, probably switch it around a little bit depending on, sort of which one that we're playing. Not all of them have companions, so can't always have that. But this made the most sense to us, but sort of...
This to me was what made the other Dragon Age games important or stand out.
Yeah.
All these 5 things were like the 5 pillars of what made Dragon Age. So we're reviewing this on a very, unk type status of... Back in my day, like Dragon Age was like this.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's take it for what you will. If you enjoy, honestly, I'll say this: if you enjoy the Spider-Man and God of War games and the new Assassin's Creed games, you might think the combat's a 7. You might think the progression system's an 8. But to me, as an old school RPG player, it was garbage.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's definitely that's the thing. They made a Dragon Age game. And it's not that, right? You have the lore and the setting, sure, but it's kind of it. And it's a little disappointing to see. But yeah, kind of wrapping all that up, puts us kind of into our final category, which is just sort of our final thoughts on the game, giving sort of a score overall of what we went through. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say that what we're going to end with in regards to the score isn't going to be an accumulation or a cumulative score, rather. It's just going to be sort of contextualizing the game within the wider gaming scene right now, and then sort of speaking on some of the things that we necessarily didn't mention, because there are some positives to the game that we didn't get into that we kind of want to spend this time to sort of speak on. But yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
I think that this game does a lot of things right, and especially in the modern gaming space, it stands out for a lot of good reasons. So even though I gave combat and progression 2 and 2, that doesn't mean I'm going to give the game a 4 overall. Like, I think the game is a lot better than the sum of its parts as a whole.
Yeah, for sure, and I definitely think it warrants mentioning some of the other things, right? So in regards to like the settings that the game has, like the actual settings, right? There's a lot of graphical settings. There's a lot of accessibility settings. There's a lot of the fact that you can change the graphics and it shows it in real time is not something a lot of games do. And thankfully, there's only 2 graphical settings that really make you restart the game.
Yeah,
and that's huge. Like, that's super meaningful. To me specifically, and I'm sure to a lot of other people too. But to me, because it's like I don't want to sit here and turn it off and on because I like messing with the settings. I think that's, I mean, it might sound kind of stupid, but that's kind of like the fun of it. You know what I mean? Trying to min-max your settings. Like, I do like that a lot.
I want the game to look as good as I can and as smooth as I can.
Yeah, for sure. Which leads into the next thing, which is the performance. The game runs beautifully. I'm a big fan of it. This is one of the few games that I can turn on RTX to like the max settings. Now, granted, I am running DLSS on like the performance mode, but I can turn on RTX to the highest settings, and it's still it looks beautiful, like it looks great, and it's running at
now
60
real quick,
55 60 FPS.
Real quick, I agree, but we should put a disclaimer. I'm running it off a 2080 Super, so not like be all end all super great, but a pretty decent graphics card, a more modern graphics card. What are you running?
I have a 3070.
Yeah, so we're not running it. It's not like you don't need a 4080 to play this at Ultra. I was running it on Ultra in every single part with no frame drops up until I got to like a large city, and I just had to lower texture settings from Ultra to high. That was the only setting I changed. Everything else was on max. And it ran 60 frames per second, 1080p the entire time.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And yes, I am also running 60 f. I mean, I have like a 1440p 144 hertz monitor, but I'm doing 1080p 60 fps. It's just kind of, I don't know, I'm weird. It's like my preferred way of playing single player games, and then like multiplayer games I like low settings, big frames, or big resolution, high frames type.
On Counter-Strike, you're running 460 frames per second.
Yeah, like that's the idea, right? But another thing to mention too, right? The lack of bugs. Honestly, didn't really experience anything at all. Sometimes
I had nothing.
Yeah, sometimes mantling would be a little weird, but like I'm not gonna sit here and like say that there's anything to hold against it. Other than that, man, literally no bugs that I've encountered. Not to say there aren't any. I just haven't encountered any. The polish on the game is it's crazy. It's honestly insane, right? The settings of performance, the lack of bugs, the fact that it has no de novo. I don't need Origin. Like, come on, like if you had told me this was EA like a year ago, I would have been like,
yes.
For 6 months ago, I'd have been like, no, like it's gonna have all this. Like, don't sweat it. Like, it's gonna, it's gonna run like ass. It's not gonna work. Blah blah blah. It'll be boring. So on and so forth. But no, they did well by that, and you got to commend them for it, especially again in today's gaming arena, right? So,
I 100% agree. I think the fact that EA, of all companies, of all publishers, released a game with this level of like kind of freedom for people. Like you can download it off Steam, you could get it off Origin, you can get it off a bunch of different stuff, and you don't have to log into EA to play it when you log in on Steam. Like I can get it on Xbox, Microsoft Store, and play it on my PC, and there's no Origin login. Like I don't have to do any of this other bullshit.
Yeah, for sure.
No de novo is huge. I know, people have very strong opinions on it and stuff. To me, it's always just made games run a little bit slower. I don't really care, but it does have an effect on performance to me. So seeing it not launch with it was nice.
Yeah, and totally would 100% agree. And I think one nice thing I'd want to hit on before, sort of hit it with my final score, is definitely rated it poorly throughout most of this. But I think a lot of it is mostly a matter of taste. I think the story setup, I think, is probably the only thing I would say objectively I think is really weak. But I would say the combat, the progression system, your companions, world building, blah, blah, blah. I definitely think is, I think that's all a matter of taste. And it's not necessarily for me. So in terms of like saying, like speaking objectively, which is what I would like my final score to be on the game, I definitely want to take that into consideration. But again, the greater gaming context, and then also speaking to the fact that, of course, there is a matter of opinion sort of, lurking within all of that kind of accumulates to what I would say is my final score. But
that's the thing. For some people, this combat is going to be a blast.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. They're going to love it.
But for me, it was nice to have the option to change those settings specifically while not changing other difficulty settings.
Yeah.
They gave you plenty of options to kind of play around with and, customize your overall experience with the game. And I think that's important. I think not only for, me who just didn't like the combat, for like accessibility purposes, for people who don't have, who don't have the ability to hit the buttons in that certain way. Like, I think it's cool that they made it very accessible and you could ignore certain aspects of the game to get to the story, because that's Dragon Age. I mean, Dragon Age is the story to me personally.
For sure. No, it's super cool. And one final thing, DEI woke, it just has no business in any sort of gaming circles, discussions, anything like that. It's nonsense. It's, if you ask me when I was a teenager, how widely accepted being a gamer was, I would have told you I don't tell anybody because it's not popular and you get made fun of. And then now that we've become a more wider spread, more accepting group in sort of the public eye, and then now we're gonna take a stance and start to exclude people. No, there's just no place. It's ridiculous. This game.
But that's the thing. The game never makes you participate in that.
No, you
like
don't
if you don't want to romance the man, you don't have to.
Yeah,
but you can. It gives you the option.
Exactly.
It's an option.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I mean,
because you figure,
it's also a fantasy game.
and
It's there's dwarves, dude.
and elves, yeah, and like if having to identify that your pronoun is he, his, or he, him, or whatever it is, it's like, dude, like you gotta stop. Like, no, like don't play the game. Give them your money back. They don't want it. We don't want you a part of this group. That has no place in any of this. It's just ridiculous. So the DEI stuff, the woke stuff, absolutely has no place in this wider conversation. It's got to go. No, don't talk about it. But that aside, because it is important to mention, that aside, my score on it, final score on it, would be a 7. And again, I know it may not necessarily be my cumulative score, or maybe it is. Honestly, I haven't added this up and seen what it would be, but I think it'd probably be a little bit lower. But again,
We gave 2s and 3s. It's definitely not cumulative.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, because my highest is 7 and 8. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty low. So, yeah, I would say a 7. Again, wider gaming context, taking into consideration all the things that I did mention before. Still, 7 I think is really solid for a game like this. There is fun to be had here. You just need to be the right person for it.
100%. I agree. I couldn't agree more. I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think that overall, this game is enjoyable and worth your time. However, with the type of games that have come out in the past couple months, because we didn't have games. It was a drought for a while. There was not a lot of good like AAA games coming out, but like you have like Metaphor ReFantazio that just came out that like I just kept wanting to go back and keep playing instead of this because it's such a good game. Like that's a 10 out of 10 game for me. But like I still enjoyed it. Like if I didn't have anything else to do, if I didn't have any other games to play, I wouldn't mind playing more of this.
Well, thank you guys very much for watching and sticking through till the end of this marathon of a video. I hope you guys enjoyed your stay.
And if you did, we have a couple other projects coming up. We're looking forward to Stalker 2 coming out in a few weeks, so look for another video similar to this for when that comes out. And then we have like a little different thing going on. We have a Fallout project that we worked on a little bit ago that we've been just kind of waiting to release because we haven't had anything else to put up with it. But yeah, that's going to be a little bit different, but also fun and just us being us. So if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed this, if you enjoy us, stick around for that.
And once again, thank you guys very much for watching, and we will see you guys next time.
Yerp.